So as Kenny said here this morning, who is my neighbor? So now this question that we're opening with today, we're also going to close with. And as we go through this sermon, I want this question to remain in the back of our mind as we look through what Jesus was really getting at when he was giving this question here. So I started with a little bit of imagery here. Started with, imagine you're walking down a quiet street here in Holcomb, Missouri. It's a place we all know. There's friendly smiles most of the time, familiar roads, but suddenly you see someone lying on the side of the road, maybe hurt from an accident or maybe worse. But what do you do? Do you stop or do you keep walking? Maybe thinking, that's not my problem, and just carry on. You see, but this isn't just a hypothetical. This is actually the heart of a story that Jesus told 2,000 years ago. A story that challenges everyone who reads it. And today we're looking at the parable of the Good Samaritan, which is found in Luke chapter 10. See, this isn't just a nice tale about helping others, but yet it's a call to redefine love in a divided world that seems to have that divide constantly growing day by day. And in these divided times, many are politically, racially, and socially divided, which makes this parable all the better. And the more that we continue to have this divide grow, the more powerful that these parables that Jesus has given us get as we go on through history. And see, Jesus didn't tell it to make us feel good or to make those who originally asked him this question feel good. And a lot of times that's a constant theme. Jesus didn't necessarily come here to make us feel good. He came here to correct some issues and ultimately give us this gift of eternal life. But when he gives lessons, he gives them in a way that they stick. And he told it to shake us up. See, this question came from a religious expert. The question of, who is my neighbor? And Jesus' answer kind of flipped everything upside down with this. So as we unpack this, I want us to ask ourselves, who are the neighbors that we're ignoring? And that's really the heart of what this is getting at. The question of who are my neighbors wasn't just so that he could tell them who we're helping, but what it was really getting at was who are those that are in need that we're not helping. And to say that loving your neighbor doesn't just mean those who you like or those who you agree with, but rather those in front of you who are in need. And how can we live this just like the Samaritan did? See, the Samaritan, he stepped across divides with compassion. And by the end, my hope here is that we can leave this committed to living this out day after day in our everyday life. So I'd like to get into setting the scene here. We're going to start by reading this parable start to finish, and then we're going to walk back through it after that. And again, this parable is found in Luke chapter 10, verses 25 down through 37. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asks, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, and he gave them to the innkeeper. 'Look after him,' he said, 'and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have.' Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus told him, "Now go and do likewise." Again, showing this supposedly religious expert who his neighbor really was. Because we've seen there that he was wanting to kind of get away with who he had to take care of and who he didn't, which is the whole reason why he questioned him. And this exchange happened during Jesus' ministry as he's teaching and healing in Judea. See, the lawyer, which was a scholar of the Jewish law, isn't asking innocently. Luke says he stood up to test Jesus, not to genuinely inquire, but to test him, maybe to seem smart, to show, or to catch him in a trap, or just to try to show off his own personal knowledge, trying to catch Jesus. But Jesus, as always, turns the tables like he always does when confronted and asked questions. We see this as a common occurrence when confronted by the Pharisees. And the two commandments that they used here when Jesus asked what is required is the lawyers, they quote from Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5, and Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. The core of Jewish ethics, loving God and loving neighbor, sums up the entire law. And he says that because if you truly love God and you truly love your neighbor, everything else that he's commanded us to do naturally falls in place. If you're loving your neighbor, you're not going to lie and steal from him. If you love God the way it tells us to here, you're not going to be worshiping other idols. Everything naturally falls into place. But the lawyer here wanted a loophole. He wanted to know who counts as my neighbor before I have to go and carry this out to see if I can maybe leave some people out of this. Or does it really mean that I got to help everybody? And in his world, his view of what a neighbor was probably just fellow Jews. And just to be completely honest, it was probably just the ones that he considered to be righteous. And that was in his scope of what he sees as his neighbor. But Gentiles and sinners and Samaritans, especially Samaritans, those would not have been included into what he would have thought was his neighbor. And when he asked this question, Jesus didn't just give him a dictionary answer or just give an answer, but rather, like always, or most of the time, he gave him a parable to make him realize himself. And he tells a story. And in that story, he picks the most unlikely hero to drive this point home, which again is also another common occurrence with Jesus. If he can use someone to have the shock factor, he's going to use it every single time. So Jesus intentionally uses a Samaritan because he knew that it would not be who this Jew included as his neighbor. There wasn't a question about that. He knew for a fact that this Samaritan, there's no chance. So now, let's walk through this parable step by step. So first, the setting. When Jesus gets ready to tell this story, he first kind of sets it up. And what he does here is he's setting it up here. And we got the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, which is about 17 miles. And in this 17 miles, you actually drop about 3,000 feet in elevation through rocky desert canyons. So he was infamous for bandits, as we see here. So the best way to think of this is like an ancient highway with no streetlights or no police, just shadows and danger. The man is, you had to work with me here. Apparently I got the smallest ears of anybody that uses these microphones. This man here is likely a Jew. It doesn't tell us his ethnicity, but it would definitely promote this story even further, make it stand out even more. But he's ambushed, he's stripped, he's beaten, and he's left for dead. He's vulnerable, exposed, with no one to help him. Right? Then after Jesus kind of sets this up and he tells us about the man that's on the road and where they're coming from, he then begins to enter characters into this story. And the first one he enters is the priest, a religious leader, and one of the elite of that day. He's coming down the road, probably after temple duties in Jerusalem, and he sees the man and he passes by on the other side of the road. But why? Maybe he's in a hurry, or more than likely, purity laws is what was holding this man back from offering help. For one, to see if he was alive, and two, to administer help if he was. Because if the man was dead, touching him would make him ritually unclean for 7 days. And if that was the case, he couldn't work in the temple then. And we get this from Numbers chapter 19, verse 11. He says, "Whoever touches a human corpse will be unclean for 7 days." Which again would then not allow him to serve in the temple. So he chooses religious duty over simple human need. And seeing this kind of feels familiar. I know that there's been times in my life where I've let some selfish ambitions help me or keep me back from helping someone in need. As much as I say that wasn't true, I've had some times where, looking back now, the things that's kept me from it were so minute and they kind of hurt now. The second person he brings to the story is the Levite. Similar story to what we've seen with the priest here. The Levites assisted the priests in the temple. and he sees the man and does the same thing. He passes by. Maybe he thinks the priest didn't stop, so why should I? Or perhaps fear of bandits. After all, it could be a trap, and at the end of the day, the excuses pile up, and then we eventually talk ourselves into going around and not doing it. And this mindset's easy to get into, especially with the high speed of life today. It's not hard to come up with enough excuses on our own end to not go do something. An example of this is you see a homeless person in the Walmart parking lot as you're leaving the store, but you don't stop because you got to get dinner started. But not only that, but you also got to stop by the bank. And Mom said dinner's got to be started by 6 o'clock, and it's 5:30. And brother, I'm in a hurry. I got to get there. Now, I use that a lot because Walmart is one place that I use a lot. Because especially if I'm by myself and I'm driving in, I'm driving out, usually there's one or two people somewhere in that parking lot that's sitting there with a sign. And they're not going to go nowhere. They've done been there for a couple hours, so when you stop to talk to them, they're not going to run away from you. They usually always sit there and listen. And at the end of that, I kind of always tell them, offer them to buy them food or lunch or dinner in exchange for 5 minutes of their time. And I think that's a pretty good trade there. But again, sometimes I've been leaving and I've been in a hurry and I've allowed these excuses to build up, similar to what we've seen here, which has then allowed me to drive on by. See, these two here, the priest and Levite, they represent the religious establishment of that time. They're what that Jewish society in that time would have been considered the good guys. The ones who know the law inside and out, but yet they fail spectacularly. See, knowing the rules isn't enough if it doesn't lead to action. See, this is the difference between just feeling sympathy and actually having compassion. So as we read the New Testament, we see this commonly. Jesus has to continually show the Jews what this law was actually given for here. The Jews had then got to the point now where the law was almost, what they were translating it to, was to make them holy through their own personal actions, where if they maintain this law, then they're standing on their own behalf, they became holy. But see, that's not what it was given for. So the law wasn't to make them holy, but rather it was to be used as a mirror to actually show them how dirty they are and why they need forgiveness in the first place. You see, and we see an example of this because Paul mentions this in his letter to the Romans. We find this in Romans chapter 7, verse 7. Paul says, "What shall we say then? Is the law sinful? Certainly not. Nevertheless, I would have not known what sin was had it not been for the law. For I would not have known what coveting was if it was not for the law and what it said. You shall not covet." So again here, we got the first two examples, and he brings these first two in to show them an example of what not to do and what we don't want to see. But then again, he brings in ultimately what is the answer to this religious expert's question. He brings in the Samaritan. And this is where the twist comes in to Jesus' audience and everyone there that day listening to it. See, Samaritans were the enemy. And I got a little bit very quick recap of history here, but there was centuries of bad blood between the Jews and the Samaritans. See, after Assyria conquered northern Israel in 722 BC, they intermarried with foreigners, and they created a mixed race and religion. And the Jews saw them as heretics who worshipped on the wrong mountain. See, there was mutual hatred, and the Jews wouldn't even travel through Samaria if they could help for it, which is precisely why Jesus used the Samaritan in this story, to show them how the person who they call heretics and the ones that are not even making it, the outsiders, if you will, are the ones that actually did the right thing and actually follow what God had said with loving your neighbor. And again, I have a quick recap here. In 931 BC, after the death of King Solomon, we see that the United Kingdom of Israel had now split into a northern and southern kingdom. And in 722, Assyria conquered this northern kingdom, which had Samaria inside, which we said here. We move on down to 450 to around 400 BC. We see that now there's two different worship sites, one for the Jews and one for the Samaritans, because again, they still wouldn't intermingle with each other. One was Mount Gerizim, and the other was in Jerusalem. Then we move on a little further, and this is what really solidifies this argument and this tension between the Samaritans and the Jews. At about 111 to 110 BC, the Jews actually go and destroy this worship place that they have now, which solidified any dispute that they had. There wasn't much going back after this. So now this hatred against each other has kind of been set in stone. Again, the exact reason why Jesus uses Samaritan to show these religious experts, supposedly, what the right thing was and how to push this answer. See, but the Samaritan sees the man, and it says that he's moved with compassion. The Greek word used here means a gut-wrenching pity. He doesn't just feel sorry, but he acts. I said earlier, there's a difference between sympathy and compassion. Sympathy is just simply to sympathize with somebody. But when we start talking about compassion, compassion is feeling for them to such a point that action leads to doing something about it. And that's exactly what he did here. He was moved by with compassion, which means he acts. He approaches this man. He bandages his wounds with oil and wine, which at that time would have been ancient first aid. He loads the man on his own donkey, so there is reason to believe that maybe now he had to walk. He takes him to an inn. He cares for him overnight. He pays 2 denarii, which of that time, 2 denarii was about 2 days' worth of wages. So now you can imagine working Monday to Friday, and you getting that paycheck only on 3 days just to help a man out that you don't even know. And it doesn't really end there, because then he tells the innkeeper that when he comes back, any extra charge that this man has accumulated, I will also pay. So it could have been more costly than 2 denarii, but at the very least, it cost him 2. Again, it's here, moving with compassion and helping people. It's costly in time, in money, and in personal safety. Now, in today's time, especially in America, it's not really a risk to tell someone about Jesus. It's pretty safe. I mean, you may hear some things you don't want to hear coming back at you, but there's not really a harm in physical damage to your body. I like to use Kenny for this example. Kenny loves hitchhikers. And I think we can all agree today that picking up a hitchhiker is slightly different than what it used to be 20, 30 years ago. You know, you don't know who you're putting in there. And not only is that man trapped in there with you, having to hear about the Jesus story, but you're also trapped in there with him at 60 miles an hour. And I know Kenny's not jumping out, neither is that man, so they're going to have to figure it out in that car before it comes to a stop. But there's not a lot of danger in today's time with with getting through this. But Jesus ends this parable by asking which one was the neighbor. So now he wants this religious expert to take this story he's given him with the examples and the characters, and now wants him to tell him who it is, to answer his own question that he originally asked Jesus with. And the lawyer can't even say Samaritan. Instead of saying Samaritan, he just simply says, the one who showed mercy. And Jesus' command, he told him, now go and do likewise. See, that's another commonality. When Jesus tells us something and teaches us a lesson, it's never just to know it, but rather there's always a call to action that follows to the end. Again, I said earlier, it's not good enough just to know if we don't act on it. Knowing does us no good if we don't go change somebody's life with it. It's like knowing about Jesus has done for me and then just telling y'all good luck, I hope you figure it out. You know? So this isn't about being a good person, but rather about mercy that crosses enemy lines. Again, not just friendships and the ones we like, but in this circumstance, actual enemies for centuries. The Samaritan didn't ask if the victim deserved help. He didn't bend down and ask him of his ethnicity. He didn't ask him of who his friends were or who he believed in. But rather, at the end of the day, he saw the need, was moved with compassion, which then caused him to come forward with action and do what he did, which was costly to him as well. He just simply helped. There was no other strings attached to it. He just helped. And that was the end of it. So what is Jesus teaching us here? So I got 3 main points that I think that we can pull from this parable and really take away from it. And the first one is, what the core of this story is your neighbor is anyone in need. It's not just the ones we like or the ones we want to help, but it's all who need help. See, the lawyer wanted limits. He wanted to know who's in and who's out. Who do I have to help and who can I not have to help? See, Jesus says, he sums this up with that there's no limits. There's nobody that's out of this. Everybody's in. See, the neighbor isn't defined by race or religion or relationship. It's the person that's right in front of you who needs help. And who doesn't need help in some way, maybe just needs a smile. I don't know if you've ever had them friends. I know that I do. I I got friends you just can't put in a bad mood, and sometimes I just desperately want to be in a bad mood today. Something's went wrong, and I want to sulk, and I want to sit here and be mad about it. But there's these people that they can't not smile. And when you come around, I'm trying my hardest just to stay in this bad mood, but you can't do it. And I think everybody needs one of those. But here, sometimes physical help isn't necessarily needed, but sometimes it's just for a fellow Christian just to lend a smile on the way, just to show this kindness, this friendliness, this welcomeness, really. See, in this parable, the victim is speculated a Jew. Again, it doesn't tell us, purely speculation, and the helper a Samaritan. See, enemies becoming neighbors simply through mercy. Not through having to, but through seeing a need and doing what he's supposed to with loving his neighbor. The second thing we can pull from this is that love requires not only action, but the majority of the time it's also going to cost us. Now, compassion, again, isn't a feeling, but as you look through a lot of leadership literature, a lot of times they use compassion as a verb because it leads to action. The Samaritan got his hands dirty with bandages, with oil, wine, his donkey, his money, and his time. So for him, the Samaritan, to help this man was fairly costly, not to mention the danger of actually taking the time to stop and assist him in this area. The priest and Levite saw but didn't act. And the most that they could have done is walk by and maybe give him a good luck on the way. I hope it works out and moves on. That's probably all they give him, if even that. And I bring it up because James had something to say about this, about just wishing somebody well but not having action. See, James writes in chapter 2, verses 15 to 16, "Suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about their physical need, what good is it?" It's kind of like having a best friend gets evicted in the middle of winter and he comes to your front door asking to stay the night. And you tell him, "Good luck, stay warm," and you shut the door. He's probably not going to stay warm. He might even freeze to death now. But just simply wishing something is not nearly the same as acting, and that's what we're called to do. Mercy costs. And it might mean interrupting your schedule, maybe risking your reputation that you hold in front of them. And this can be meant in a few different ways. I know when I was younger, this kind of meant I had a certain friend group, and if I was to go help and really tell someone about Jesus and help someone that way, it might risk, I might not be cool anymore to my friends or whatever that may be. But as we get older, right, this reputation that we damage kind of changes. And one thing I kind of look at is maybe the reputation of the Open Door Church when we decided to do what we're going to do or what the public said about us. Did that slightly change whenever we spoke about this? Did we get talked about in a different light? And if we cared about necessarily what they said to be true, we might not have done it. But at the end of the day, we worry more about helping somebody in need than maybe what the reputation of those who don't even understand what we do are. Or maybe giving financially. But that's the love that God shows us, which is costly, sacrificial, just like the cross. And again, I bring this up because Jesus looking down, which we know that God knew beforehand, but I could just imagine this, God looking down on creation, seeing us in our lies, in our deceit, in everything else we've done, right, and wanting to fix it, seeing that there's a need for us to be rescued. And did it cost him? Absolutely it cost him. It cost him his life. But he's still done it purely out of the fact that he loves us. He didn't gain anything from coming down here and helping us. Matter of fact, there were some things he lost. He had to be hung on a cross for one. So there's nothing to gain from it. But he loved us enough that it didn't matter. And he come down here to save us and pay the ultimate price. And it definitely cost him. The third one I have here is religion without mercy is empty. See, the religious pros failed, but yet the outsider succeeded. See, Jesus critiques hypocritical faith, but today there are a lot of churches full of religion but lacking mercy to those outside of their social circle. They lack compassion. And a lot of times I try to kind of stray away from this subject. I don't like to go too far off into this. But how many churches have we seen today that they sing really good songs and they get up and they dance and they shout, but let someone come in that's not dressed as nice as they are, or maybe not the same as they are, and see how welcome that these people are. You don't see it. Or maybe ask them how their outreach is going. Again, they sing good songs and we got good breakfast. But we baptized 3 people this last year. So how much good are we doing? Are we really going out there and seeing the need that needs to be met and meeting it? Or are we just wishing them good luck if we're even going that far? See, the parable previews the gospel. So Jesus, the ultimate outsider, which was God becoming man, shows mercy to us, beaten by sin and left for dead. He binds our wounds and He pays our debt, again, with His own life, and promises to come back, or promises to return. See here, we're the victim, and rather He's the Samaritan. So just think back to Jesus' story, right? If it wasn't for Jesus coming down, the gospel and the services that we hold today would be a lot different. I always like to make this joke here. When we get to Romans 6:23, you wouldn't have this second half. We just come here and tell you that you've sinned, and this price you got for sin is death. I'll see you next Sunday. A lot of you might not be coming back next Sunday. There's not any hope there. But thank goodness that He loved us enough to come and pay that price for us. Now, we went through this parable and the lessons that I think that He was really trying to push for us here. But what about modern application? The here and now. How do we take this parable and apply it today with current lifestyles? And the first one I got is, again, seeing the need. If you don't see the need, you can't meet it. In today's times, I mentioned that everything is continually getting faster and faster paced. Especially as technology evolves, we can do more things in our day now by using this, and things just speed up, and you blink, and it's by the end of the day now. But what I got here is slow down and notice people. As you're going through your day, it's real easy to only see what's directly in front of you and ignore everything else. Allow it to be a blur where you can't even recall by the time you got to the end of your day. But slow down. Look at people. See your environment going on and just take a minute and look around. Because I promise you, if you take long enough and look around, you're going to see a need anywhere you go. It's everywhere. What about the single mom at the grocery store? Or the elderly neighbor? Or the coworker struggling? Right, again, it's easy to go about our day and to go to the store and get out because we're trying to get out as quick as humanly possible. Or maybe we stay in our home, we don't really look out much. Or coworkers, we just get used to coming in and not really paying attention. I do my job and that's all I'm worried about and I go home. But I promise you, at least one point in their life, that coworker is going to have something going on and they're going to reflect it outwardly. And we got to be willing, again, to slow down, to see the change in their characteristics and just lend that helping hand and just offering help. Or at least a simple, man, how are you doing? To open that conversation, which may hopefully lead to telling the Jesus story, but at the very least, adding a layer of comfort there so when you do have the chance to have this, he's more susceptible. The second one here I got is to cross divides. So who is your Samaritan, or rather the person that you least want to help? Maybe someone with different politics, maybe different faith or background. But regardless of any of these, it's just simple as reaching out. Not everybody's going to listen to you, but you don't know if you don't talk to them. And I've got buddies at work that, as I've gotten to speak to, that are Hindus, that are Muslims, that don't believe at all. But for the most part, everyone I've ever spoken to has been pretty receptive. And actually, for the most part, I'm one of the very few people that's actually talked to them, I think because they felt a distance because of a different religion. Or maybe the fear of that they're going to shut them down or they're not going to talk to them. Maybe the things that they might say back to them. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Again, we see the need. We must follow it with action. Everyone in front of us, regardless of who they are, is our neighbor. And see here, and God knew this when He gave us the command to love your neighbor as yourself. We enjoy this free gift of eternal life that we have, so why wouldn't we be giving it to our neighbors? A small town such as the one we're currently in, we have plenty of opportunity. Even though we're small, we have plenty of opportunities here. We have rural poverty, we have opiate, alcohol issues, racial tensions. So at the end of the day, just be a Samaritan in your community. See, the author of Hebrews kind of wrote a little bit about this topic in chapter 13, verse 16. He said, "Do not forget to do good and to share with others." for with such sacrifices God is pleased. So here it's saying to please God, we need to do good and to share with others. So it's pretty simple. I want to please God. I want to do the best that I can do. Sharing with others. See here, the parable of this Good Samaritan isn't just a story, but rather it's a mirror. And that's exactly why he told this story to these religious experts. He told it to them because he knew who they wanted to exclude, and he wanted to show them how dirty they were and how that's not true at all. And use an outsider that they thought was a heretic, was unclean, was no good, to be the one to actually do what God had instructed. And he's really good at that here. See here, Jesus calls us to be neighbors, not simply bystanders. See, I guess I got a question for you here. It says, who will you help this week? So I ask you to keep this question in your mind here. So as we conclude this today, I'd like, if there's anybody that comes to mind that maybe we've been slightly distancing, or maybe we've been putting off or procrastinating helping for whatever the reason may be, allow this week to be the week that you reach out. As simple as a text, a call, a hey, or whatever it is. You see here, and to be a good neighbor, there's one characteristic that I think you got to have to be a good neighbor. To be a good neighbor, you got to be willing to tell your neighbors the Jesus story. Because without that, I don't think you can sit here and say that you love your neighbor. If you love them, you want what's best for them. What's best for them is eternal life. And now Kenny's going to come up here, and he's going to be that neighbor today, and he's going to tell you exactly how to receive this free gift of eternal life.